Alrighty, and we are now live. Yeah,
Nice.
so thank you everyone for joining us. Yeah, real quick, this is our first episode of Mission Briefing, and this I guess stream or series of streams is about just all kinds of different things from within the GraphQL community and within Apollo, as far as like interesting topics that are very useful, but don't really fit into a particular scheme, right? So you never know what we'll be doing in each episode. Like today, we're looking at Apollo tooling. Next episode, we're actually going to be having, in a future one, we're going to have Auth-O. Ooh, Venix11, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. Yeah, and so that's what mission briefing is. And today I have Jake Dawkins here with me, and he is going to walk us through some information about properly configuring Apollo projects, right? Like when you think of Apollo, it spans across the client and the server, and then just like there's a lot of other places and parts that all need to be configured, and he's going to help us figure out how to do that. So it's really cool. I'm excited for this. Jake, did you have anything you want to add to that? Maybe just say hey to
Yeah,
everyone.
hi everybody. I don't think I have anything too crazy to add. This is my first Twitch stream, not
Yeah,
hopefully not a
we
Twitch
might
stream.
stream. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
happy to be here. It's gonna be a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. Oh, NX11 said, yeah, thanks for providing this content. No problem. We love to provide this content. We
Our
are
pleasure.
excited to be in a position to provide it. And yeah, we hope that it's super useful. And also, for um, in the future, if you're not able to make a stream, we also take all of the past streams and put them onto YouTube. And we also cut highlights from them. So if you go to YouTube, there's a quick tips playlist, and in there you can just find like neat little tips and tricks and things that we learned throughout all these different streams. So yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, but if you're looking for something a little more social and a little less isolated, given the times that we're in, feel free to join us here and hop in the chat and, you know, tell us all the things we're doing wrong and help us figure out when we
Yeah,
need
yeah,
debugging help. So,
yeah, for
cheers.
sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Perseus18 said we want it every day. I wish we could get there. And yeah, we might be at a point one day where yeah, there's like streaming content coming out of Apollo every day. So yeah, we've definitely found it an amazing way to engage with you, right? The community, and yeah, so we love it. It's awesome. Cool. I guess yeah, let's talk a little bit more. Oh, real quick, if the music is too loud or either one of our mics are too low, please let us know in the chat. Getting, we're new to this, right? So getting these the audio and video and everything working well is quite difficult. So we're doing the best that we can, but yeah, let us know if it's off. Cool. Yeah, I feel like I've prefaced every episode with that, and it's like 6 or 7 episodes now. And at what point is it where it's just like, okay, get it
I
together,
feel like it's
right?
only
Like,
fair.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like it's only fair. I mean, if video chat software has taken, decades to get it right, I feel like you can preface as
Yeah,
much as you
yeah,
want that some things still might be
yeah.
off for us, having done this a few
Exactly. We're
times.
iterating, right? It's like software. We're iterating. We're always trying to get better. Like even
Yeah.
right now, I'm noticing I am coming in super dark. So I'm actually just going to turn up the light just a hair. Be right back.
Music could be a bit less, but it's not
Okay, well
bad at
that's
all.
totally fine. I can do that. I can make the music a bit less with very minor effort. So let's do that. And that should be a bit less. So hopefully that adjustment was enough. Yeah, very cool. All right. Yeah, so I guess let's dive into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about what we're here to talk about, Apollo tooling. Um, yeah, so Jake here works on the open source team at Apollo, and he works with Apollo tooling day in and day out. So he's used to seeing. Is it safe to say that you've seen almost every sort of like configuration for Apollo that you can come across, Jake?
Um, I'm hesitant to say yes. I will say if I haven't seen it, it's probably terrifying. So, so yeah, probably for the
Yeah,
most part.
yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Jake is going to. Well, actually, why don't I let you talk? What are we gonna do today, Jake? What are we gonna do?
Yeah. So first off, I just want to preface, like, if you're not familiar with all of the Apollo ecosystem, I just want to like preface and first say that when we talk about tooling, Apollo tooling specifically, we actually have a repo in our org named Apollo Tooling. And that repo is what I generally refer to as tooling. So not things like Apollo client dev tools, but definitely things like developer workflow tooling. So the CLI that we have and the VS Code extension, as well as the language server that powers both of those things, and then the Apollo config for those tools, is bundled into all of that as well. So, yeah, when I say Apollo tooling, that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, during this stream, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna talk about we're gonna talk about a few things. The first thing is just gonna be in general what the config is, what it's used for, whether or not you need a config, and then we're actually gonna go through a few sample projects that I've set up, and these are all going to be publicly available too. I'll drop a link in the chat in just a minute for that. So we're going to walk through a repo that I've set up with all these sample projects and sample configs, and actually talk through how you might go about setting up these projects, because some of them are easy, some of them are much less easy. So yeah, does that make sense, Kurt?
That sounds like a fantastic time to me. Yeah. All right, cool. So I guess the first thing is let's I guess drop the link in the chat to that the repo that we'll be using, and we'll bring that up, right? That's a good first step, or do you want to go to the docs first, or?
Yeah, let's jump to the config docs very first thing, and then we'll go to that quickly.
That sounds good to me. So I'm gonna blow this up so that it's hopefully a little more legible, and then docs for the config. Where would I find those?
Development tools on the left-hand bar, so you don't need to go into any of the subpages.
Configuring.
Then configuring Apollo
look
projects.
at that. There's even a doc for it already. Boom. I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is it's kind of a pretty well fleshed out blog post, documentation page, whatever you want to call it. We have done blog posts about this in the past. Now we have videos about it here. So this page pretty much is starting from zero experience with any of Apollo's tooling. It kind of walks you through how you go about setting up what we call the apollo.config.js file, which is the default file name. You could name it pretty much anything you want as long as it's a JavaScript file. But this is a JavaScript file that we load up, we parse through. There's an exported object that's just a config object that tells us things like, where do we find the files for your project? If we're looking through a folder, where do we find GraphQL documents to generate types for? Where do we find a schema to generate those types against? So this page here is actually very handy. If you haven't read through it before, I would recommend reading through it, as it changes every now and then with some new things. And then on the right bar, you see our headings. There's two major headings here: client projects and server projects. And this is the main point that I want to bring home about this page and about the Apollo config in general, is that right now we have two different kinds of projects, conceptually. We have server projects and client projects, and the difference between the two is actually very important. We'll show you what that looks like in code in a minute with the config itself, but the gist of it is a server project. It doesn't have to be Apollo server. It frequently is Apollo server, but it's where your GraphQL schema is defined. It's what you develop your GraphQL schema against. If you're building an API, that's the kind of project that would work in. And and when I say project, it's just any folder that contains all of that stuff. And client project, similar idea, but it doesn't have to be Apollo client. It could be any language. It could be, or any language we support. So if you're writing in Python, for example, and you're defining queries in Python, that's the kind of project that you're looking at there as a client project, not a server project.
Is it safe to say things that are consuming a GraphQL API is what we consider a client project? Okay.
Yep. There's one like weird edge case here where a server project
As
is a
well?
client project for
Ah,
another server.
interesting. Okay.
Um, yeah, because GraphQL APIs could also call out to other
Right, right.
GraphQL APIs. I I didn't think about that until just this second, so I don't have an example of that in our demo today, but that would be a
Yeah,
good
that's
thing to
okay.
add.
Well,
Um,
if you're out there and you've done that before, reach out to Jake here, get that project added. I feel like that's a
yeah,
much smaller kind of edge case, probably in some cases. But yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's definitely less like frequent. I mean, when we talk about GraphQL servers, generally, a lot of GraphQL servers aren't fully like typed, especially when it comes to like generating those types through something like Apollo CodeGen. Um, just because like generating types for Apollo or for GraphQL servers is a little bit tricky because the resolvers can technically return
right.
anything, which can get a little wiry unless you know what you're doing. But yeah, there are things like GraphQL Code Generator which do provide typings for GraphQL servers. But yeah, it is a much smaller edge case just because like it's less common to like generate all of your types for a GraphQL like service project than it is a client
Okay.
project.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Cool. All right. So where do we go
yeah.
from here?
Yeah. If you don't mind hopping over to the Apollo CLI page on the left-hand side, I have
Yeah,
one
I
more
don't mind at all.
comment. Um, so the Apollo CLI is what we're going to be largely working with in this, and we're just going to be talking through what we're going to be doing is going to be setting up a project and then running commands against that project with the Apollo
Cool,
CLI.
cool.
If you scroll down a little bit, I think we actually have the full command docs in here. Keep going.
Oh, here we go.
Keep
Supported
going.
commands. Ah,
Yeah,
is this what we're looking for? Yeah. Ooh.
perfect. Yeah, so you'll see here, like this is a quick doc. It shows a list of our client commands like client check, client codegen, download schema, extract, and push. These commands can only be run against a client project. So when we show you how to set up a client config, if you don't have a client config, you can't run client commands. That's something that trips people up a lot. Admittedly, we have a lot of holes in our error messaging around exactly what to do with these things. So I think this is a gotcha that a lot of people run into is they're trying to run like client download schema against a service project, or they're trying to run, I mean, I guess client push, client extract are less common things to run against a service project because there is a service push and a service check
Yeah,
as well.
okay.
But yeah, so that's the major gotcha that I wanted to point out on this page. And if you do Apollo -- help, you can see these exact same like commands listed out. But just know that client project, service project, client commands, service commands, they kind of go hand in hand. And like you can cross that barrier a little bit, but it's not
Got it.
guaranteed to work. Just because the project config those things is sometimes a little
Okay.
complicated. So yeah, just something to be noted.
Yeah, and then I guess here's a nice example of using the help command. So there you go.
Yeah.
You can use it for the individual command as well, it looks like. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I'm digging it. I'm digging it. I'm excited.
Sweet.
You've got me excited. Whoa, what happened? Your window here like resized on me in the stream. There we go. Bring it back up. That was not cool. It's
it bigger?
bigger,
Is
but
it
like it's clipping
pretty?
you a little bit. It's okay. I mean, you're still very visible.
Oh.
And I'm going to try and fix you really quick, but I'm not
Okay,
quite sure what happened there. Let's see. Let's see if we can fix this. Okay, so now you're basically back to normal, but I'm covered. Hey, and we're back. There we go. Cool. I put you back, Jake. No worries. You're back. All right.
Nice. My stream, yeah, it's not loading for me on my page, so you know,
Yeah,
we'll just have
yeah.
to suffer. I'll just have to assume
Yeah,
you're
but
right.
it looks like I'm dropping frames too, interestingly enough. So maybe I am having issues. If you're in the stream and it is not going well, if we're getting choppy or frozen, please let me know. I'm actually going to leave a note. So, unfortunately, because everybody is now looking for like virtual ways to, engage, and a lot more people are at home. Twitch has been pretty overwhelmed, and so they've been having some issues with stream quality. So yeah, it is very understandable. Yeah. All right, so I guess the next thing to do is let's go to that GitHub project. So I'm gonna crack this open. All right, and the first thing I'm gonna do is star it because you deserve a star, bud. Yeah, no problem. Favorite. There you go. Okay, so walk me through what's in here. What is available to us?
Yeah, so I'm trying to see. Yeah, still not loading for me. So I don't know if it's actually down or not.
The stream itself is not loading for you? Interesting. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do?
Same thing.
Take this.
I have audio, but it doesn't look like I have
just
video.
From the screen share or from Twitch? I'm gonna go as well and see what's going on. I believe I'm sharing my screen with you if you want to use that instead.
Yeah. That's probably the right call. I just want to make sure everybody else can see.
It's not loading for me either.
Everybody else is good.
It is not loading. That's not cool. Yeah, I don't even know if we can get messages. Well, the cool thing is I am recording this as well. So, in the off chance that it's not working for anybody, we can make sure we get it online. So we're going to continue on until someone tells us that it is not working for them, I guess. Does that seem reasonable?
Perfect. Yeah, looks good to me. Oh, wait.
All right.
Ha.
Yeah, no worries.
Second. It looks like the link in the original tweet was typoed.
Oh, to Twitch? Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Apollo GraphQL was the channel name.
Oh.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, yeah, well, we can just keep on carrying on with this, and hopefully whatever's going on fixes itself. If not, we have a recording,
so we're okay there. Yeah, interesting. All right, so yeah, we're gonna keep on keeping on, I think is the game plan here. But I need
to... Nice.
Yeah, worst case, we'll make sure we get it online. All right. Oh, yeah. Too many windows. I got too many windows open over here. It's driving me nuts. Yeah, right?
Story of my life. I have, I was about to say, I've been using the Peacock extension for VS Code for quite some time now, but just because it's, it's impossible to keep up with different VS Code windows.
Absolutely. I want to, are you familiar with, like, chaos engineering? Yeah. So,
yes.
Well, the fact of like
maybe
adding
like
mean. Random errors and bringing things down like throughout your system sporadically as a way to ensure that the right checks are in place, that like you don't get cascading failures. I was thinking of like writing something like that where like it would just close all your Chrome tabs or like close all your VS codes like every so often, and then it just like, oh, you got hard reset, because like I'll end up with a million tabs and I'll just leave them until forever. I won't even be using any of them. Yeah. I was a bit of a derailment, but I just thought that was worth bringing up. So someone please make that. Please make that. Okay.
Yeah, it just kind of forces you to reset every now and then.
Exactly, right? Because sometimes you just need to like clear your head. So sorry about this. I just have to fix something here. I need a new browser window. There we go. Cool. All right, so back to this. Let's talk about what's inside of this project, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So this project, I dropped a link for it in the chat. This project is kind of just imagine if you had a monorepo with just every possible every possible kind of project that your company has inside of it, every type of project that your org had inside of it. You had a mixture of client projects, you had some server projects, you had a federated server project alongside another client project that works off of that federated server project. This repo is kind of just one that I built to help me battle test the VS Code extension, battle test the CLI. Some of the like projects inside of it aren't runnable. As in like it does the important parts for like the CLI, like extracting operations, but you can't actually like start it up and see a client, just because I don't feel like maintaining a bunch of piecemeal React apps or anything, because that doesn't sound fun at all. But yeah, so this project is just a repo of a smaller projects that I use to test the CLI and VS Code extension to make sure that I don't break anything, or if I need to debug something and I'm intentionally trying to break something.
Yeah. I can dig it. That's awesome. Yeah, and this this README has kind of just a summary of all these different projects. Like it says monorepo setup. This project doesn't actually work as a monorepo in VS Code, but if you open up one of the sub projects, the federated service, it does, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, we have summaries for each of the projects, and each of the projects, the subfolders in this repo, also have their own READMEs describing what they are, what they're meant to test, and even some commands like npm scripts that you can run against them that use the Apollo CLI, just to make sure that everything's configured, and if it's misconfigured, those things would fail. This is just for you listening. This is just a that you can come to whenever you're setting up a new project. You're like, this isn't working, I don't understand this. You can just come here as a quick reference and be like, oh yeah, I'm trying to set up a federated service. This is a federated service. I might as well use this as a template and just copy paste the config and then modify it however you want. So yeah, that's what this is for you, is just a quick reference. For me, it's a chaos test of everything that could possibly be thrown at a CLI. And by everything, I don't mean everything, because this is incomplete right now. So I just open sourced some of the other things that I've been working on. Okay. So yeah, so that's where we're at. So I'm getting feedback that the video feed is blank. So that is not good. Yeah. So what we can do here, this is fine, because what we have until now is recorded, and I assume that they can hear us, but even if not, we'll just end the stream. We'll restart it. We'll be right back. We'll give a quick brief update to where we are now. We'll pick it up from there, because post-production, I can combine these together. So no one will lose anything, but what do you think? Because it seems like it is starting to, I'm having issues. All right, yeah. We should be live again, I think. Let me know when it pops up on the old Twitch channel. If it does at all.
Oh, we have a Twitch staffer in the chat. Oh, awesome.
Heck yeah. Yeah.
That could be convenient. Yes. Yeah, it looks like I have it.
Okay,
I think we're back now.
Oh, cool. Okay, so he can see now as well. Okay. Hey. So we're doing things. All right, very cool. Awesome. And thank you for the follow, and thanks for joining us. Yes, so I do know about Inspector. It's interesting. Like, most of the times, my stream quality is really good. But this is actually the second time where it's happened, where it's just slowly gotten more and more frame rate drops until I end the stream and restart it, and then everything seems to be okay. So that seems to be what has happened again. I need to figure it out. I'm also using the Streamlabs OBS beta, and so I'm wondering if it could be something in there, because I checked my connection and everything looks good. Not to be like, it can't be me. It could be my setup, but I'm wondering if that's it. So I might try and do a stream with just OBS pretty soon. Yeah, it might help debug. I'm going to try it again.
Beta's
right? Yeah. So I'm definitely going to do that again. Yeah, exactly. It went from, yeah, exactly. So it went from like it just degraded and then boom, was gone. And it doesn't happen all the time. Actually, it happens very rarely, but it has happened twice. Yeah, okay. So maybe I'll have to do that. And I am on a Mac. I'm on the Mac beta. So that, that's it's got the word beta, right? So, maybe I should switch back to OBS. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you. Also, thank you for the feedback. And sorry for the slight derailment. So what we're gonna do, because we don't know what was seen or what is not, so like we hope this isn't too repetitive, but we're just gonna catch everybody up to what we're doing and what this project is real quick, and then we should be able to take it from there. So just a quick recap. Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're talking about configuring Apollo projects, right? Because between the client and server, there's a bunch of different ways and things you need to take into account when you're configuring them. And we're going to be using the CLI and kind of walking through how the CLI will help you to set up projects and do things in your projects as long as you have the proper Apollo configuration, which is kind of like the catch to this, right? Is that a good summary, Jake? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, what we've looked at so far, if you scroll, actually, I don't know if you can see it in the chat anymore. There's there's some config docs that you can go to, but this project I wrote is really meant to supplement those docs. So if you're setting up a project and you're having issues setting it up, you're getting weird errors that you're not sure what's going on, you should be able to quickly just reference this project. Find inside of this repo, find the project that's most similar to what you're working with, and hopefully copy and paste a config. I would like building out this repo in the future to have more fleshed out examples, a lot more config setups that get even more complicated. But for now, we have, I think, 6 or 7 of the most common setups that people find. Including some things that trip people up. So hopefully we can walk through those and help solve any problems that you're either encountering or may encounter in the future.
Yeah, nice.
So.
Very well put. And I just wanted to touch on one quick note because it sounded like it was quite important when you mentioned it. And so I want to make sure that we don't breeze past it again, which is that sometimes you might try and run a command for either the clients, but really it's like you're trying to call out to a server project, and like so if it doesn't have the right configuration, or if you don't have a client configuration and you're trying to pull something from a service project, that it won't work properly because the CLI is kind of depending on those different configurations between clients and services projects. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, there should be a direct mapping between the kind of project that you're setting up, whether it's client or service, and the names of the commands you're running, which we'll show you more of in just a second.
And so that really kind of catches us up to what we were just looking at, which is this repository that Jake has put together, which I'll let you go over real quickly. What's inside again?
Yeah. So this project just has 7 subfolders right at the root. One's called Basic Client, Basic Server, Client with Local Directives. And these are just some very simple examples of projects, like project types that we see most commonly, and config files to go along with them. At the top of this project, this README gives a very quick overview of each of these projects. As well as you can see here, this like list of emojis, just a key, like a quick reference to what these projects have. So some of them are runnable. You can npm install them and start them up, which, for example, like all of the service projects we have in here, you can start up and run yourself. Some of them are not runnable, like the React projects, because I don't want to maintain a React project in this repo. But they still have like the JavaScript files that you're extracting operations from and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so each of these projects also has their own README. So if like with more information and a list of commands that you can run, like npm scripts that you can run. Yeah, so I think that gets us right back up to speed.
Awesome. Welcome back, Theo. We are glad you're here. All right, cool. Yeah, so that's caught up. So if you look, like there's a whole bunch of stuff. I love this, the federated full stack tutorial. That's amazing. Yeah,
oh, yeah.
That's really cool. I like that. We should actually talk about like maybe even expanding on that at some point. Yeah. All right. But anyway, let's not derail. Let's not derail. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not derail. We'll talk about it more in a minute. We'll set it up in a few minutes.
Yeah. Quick intros. Sure. I guess we should do that real quick. So I'm Kurt Kemple. You can follow me on Twitter at Kurt Kemple. And actually, I'll just drop it here in the old chat. Oops, I just messaged somebody called at Kurt Kemple. Yeah, and at Jake Dawkins. And actually, if you look in the panels, there's one about the current streamers. And so there's links to our Twitter profiles right below. Yeah, so yeah, this should help make it easier to give us the old follow.
My very unfleshed out Twitch profile.
Yeah, we like to put a lot of things. So there's actually resources there, a link to everything. From the docs to Apollo and Graph Manager and the blog and all of that fun stuff. So yeah. All right, cool. So what do you want to do now, Jake? What is our next step?
Nice. Do you want to hit me up with a VS Code live share link?
Oh yes, let's do that. Let's get into VS Code, right? That's the best part of anything, right? Okay, so I have Jake's project here, and so we're gonna do a live share session so that he can kind of dig around in here. And so, oops, I almost sent that to the wrong place. All right. I almost put that in the stream chat. We could have had everyone join us. That would have been great, actually. That would be fun.
Yeah.
I want to try that one day, like a collaborative stream coding session. That actually sounds like a lot of fun. All right.
It's like mob programming.
Yeah.
Twitch builds Apollo.
That's awesome. It would be fun, right? I think so. I think that would actually be a lot of fun. Yeah. Apollo on Twitch.
Apollo on Twitch. Apollo on Twitch.
I love it. Yeah. Twitch breaks production. Amazing. Okay, oh my god.
Great. Looks like I have everything here.
Are you? Oh, so you're in. So I'm going to now. Okay, because you don't have anything open.
Yeah. Terminal's still read only.
All right. I'll fix that. Terminal. Let's make this read write.
Perfect.
So you should be able to read write now.
Twitch breaks production.
Isn't that great?
No, I do plenty of that on my own.
Yeah,
don't
we'll
worry.
break production all on our own. Cool. Okay, so you should have access to the terminal. I'm not seeing anything. There we go. There it is. Yes, same. I hear you, Theo. Hi. Okay, so we're good. So what do we do now? What's next? We're just dancing, by the way.
Awesome. So yeah, we're just gonna go down this list of projects on in the file tree.
Yeah, let's do that.
Starting with basic client, and we're gonna talk through how exactly we go about setting these things up.
I love it. Let's do that.
Yeah. So before we give any cheat codes, you want to just delete the Apollo config.js file, and hopefully we can not break it.
Yeah, so I'm deleting apollo.config. Oops, whoa. Apollo.config, so this is going bye-bye, right? We're going to delete that. Goodbye.
Yep.
Okay, it is gone.
Yep, so I was about to say, the repo, for anybody watching, if you want to go back, or if you want to actually follow along, the repo actually has these config files already written out. But since we're actually going to be talking through how to build them, we figured it would be better not to just not to just read the files, because that's not a very exciting Twitch stream, but maybe break it ourselves and do it ourselves.
Yeah, let's do all the breaking.
Yeah. Nice. So if you want to open up, let me see, hold up. So if you want to open up the source file, let's talk about what this project is to begin with. So this project, we have 3 files under source. All 3 of them have, regular, not too complicated GraphQL operations inside them. They're all basic queries.
Ooh, I need that.
And what we're going to want to do is we're going to try to run CodeGen against them. So we're going to try to run CodeGen against them. But what we need to do is we need to tell Apollo, what are we generating types off of? Like, how do we know what a character is? How do we know what a character's image is, or a character's origin? Like, how do we know what these types are? Yeah, and you'll notice in this, like I mentioned a minute ago, this doesn't have any React code. This is just, you know, a JavaScript file to prove that, hey, yeah, I didn't break extracting operations from a JavaScript file, so it still works.
For sure.
And then once we get it set up, if you hop over to the package JSON real quick.
Boop.
Yep, you see we have scripts, and we have a code gen script that we're actually going to run to make sure this thing actually works. So if you want to like actually run that now just to prove that it doesn't work, and I think hover over the word code gen, click it.
That's neat.
Right?
I had no idea.
So this will prove that this shouldn't work right now. If it does, that's an interesting conundrum. But yeah, this is just going to prove that, hey, right now code is broken.
Thanks
we're not
for the
cheating.
Follow. Yeah, so it's running. It's fetching metadata, but it's not going to succeed.
Oh, yeah, I guess it.
Yeah, so it's going to do. I have never run this before.
Oh, gotcha. I was going to say also, I think NPX sometimes it'll use the linked version of Apollo, so it might actually be trying to run your local version of it.
Interesting. Wait, no, I don't think I have the. I don't think I have the CLI set up. Code Beast, what's up, Code Beast? Thank you for the follow. I don't believe I have that set up. That was a different computer.
We did that though. We did that when you were in town. Or
Yeah,
when
that
we were
was
in
a
San
different
Francisco,
laptop.
So. Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
No worries then. Awesome.
Yeah,
unless it decides to hang, in which case.
Yeah,
that's
but this
less
could be
awesome.
related to computer issues, like with the stream and stuff. It looks like we're all good. It says we're all good, and we're not dropping frames. Should I quit it and run it again?
Yeah. No. I was just saying like the installation looks like it's not working. Oh, there we go. Nice. Okay. Cool. Lovely. So yeah, this doesn't work right now, which is a good start. So let's do a couple of things here to begin with. If you see at the top level of this folder in basic client, we have a schema.graphql. That is actually the schema that we're using to generate these types off of. So if you open that really quick, Kurt, I don't know, you're not following me, right?
Yeah, here, I can follow you.
Right.
Let's do this. Boop. There you go. Is this where we are? Schema?
There we go. Awesome. Yeah, so this schema.graphql is what we're actually going to use to generate types off of. But right now the CLI has no way of knowing, hey, we need to use this. So I'm actually going to run if the terminal will still work.
Ooh, let's see.
Doesn't seem.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Oh wait, here we go. Great. NPX. Yeah. Client code. I'm just going to do this by hand. Code gen target.
Wow, look at this guy.
TypeScript.
TypeScript.
Yeah, right. Target TypeScript, and we're actually going to just say, hey, I want to use this local schema file, and the local schema file is schema.graphql,
which exists right here. And that's the file we're in.
If we're lucky.
So it looks like I'm missing an extension.
So we're just going to say, hey,
I don't have syntax highlighting for GraphQL. I feel like, oh my god, it's offensive to me.
Give it disabled.
No, I don't think I ever installed it. Oh, here we go. Unnamed project. Unable to read schema.graphql. Oh.
I wonder. Let me see. I didn't think you needed a project name for that. Let's see. Client name equals test. See what happens there.
It's weird. There's like, oh no, it said 4 projects. The error is that it can't read it. No.
Error exit code.
Oh, it said no file.
Wow.
It said.
Oh, no files associated with the project. Interesting.
Yeah, can't open schema.graphql.
That shouldn't be the case.
Do you have to do like / or something? No. Oh, because we're not in the root of that project. That's why. We're not. The terminal's not in that project.
That's it.
Gotta love it.
CD basic client. So here's a fun example of me failing at this for everybody who's watching. If you're running Apollo commands like client code, you need to be at the root of the project.
Like if you're in a mono repo.
If you are not at the root of the project, Yeah, if you're in a mono repo and you have multiple projects inside of a single repo, but you're trying to generate types for one of them, you need to CD into that project, as we just found. So now let's try this again.
Two things I want to note real
Drop
quick.
client name.
Number one is that Apollo client powers Twitch, which I love. That's so amazing. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Matt Hatter, and thank you for joining us. And also, Theo said that he just added CodeGen to an internal project, and it's like just helps with the handling the client error rates due to the extra type safety. So that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, I love hearing that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm all about types these days.
Yeah, I think it's one of the beautiful.
What were you saying? I was saying I'm all about types these days.
I was going to say that's one of the beautiful things about GraphQL is just the fact that the language, the API itself is typed. So, I mean, generating types for your client hopefully will fix a lot of problems, but.
One would hope.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm going to run this again. Maybe it'll work. But yeah, so this is just manually running the code, Apollo client CodeGen, target TypeScript. In other words, saying, hey, just go ahead and generate TypeScript types for this. I want to use the local schema file, which is schema.graphql's reference. And there we go.
Okay.
So now my file tree hasn't updated
Mine
yet, but
has.
it looks like yours has.
Let me refresh for you. Maybe that helped. Let's check.
I did not. But you can click into it.
Yeah. So where am I going? Oh, now we.
Yeah, just under source generated.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see here, if you click into one of those, we automatically generated types for all of the queries that we have in each of these files, including we have a fragment called test fragment, and one of them, I don't remember which file that is. We have a fragment, and I think it's probably query 2, no? And yeah, in query.graphql fragment that we used. We actually generated types for that. So this works. This is great. But there are a lot of times when you're running commands when you get all of these flags, there's a ton of flags, and it just gets really muddy, especially if, you have 10 commands and they all have the same flags. Like, rather than defining all the flags, we have an Apollo config.js file we can use to actually set a lot of these things without flags. So at the end of the day, if we just said, client CodeGen target TypeScript, we would love to just generate types like that rather than having to specify where we're getting the schema from. Because if you're introspecting a schema, for example, and you need some auth headers in there, that's a disgusting mess of flags that we don't want to have to worry about.
That sounds annoying. The less flags, the better, in my opinion. I mean, the less flags, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, which, I mean, you can put all those in NPM scripts and make your life a little easier. But then again, like if you have 5 NPM scripts that all have the same like introspection header auth flags, like, there's no point in doing that.
Have to change it up.
So let's create that file. At the root of the basic client project, just create a new file for me.
What are we calling this file?
Name it apollo.config.js. Yeah, and this is a regular old JavaScript file. So if you want to do anything in JavaScript, like load other files to do things in this file, that's totally okay.
Correct?
You can do that.
Good?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're gonna. Perfect. Yep. This file just has to export a single configuration object. And for this project, it's actually not that crazy. So go ahead and add a client key to the top of that. Yep. And I want to specify, like, this is one important thing to note. At the top level of the Apollo config, there's 2 things. There's a client key and a service key. And earlier when I was talking about there being a difference between client projects and service projects, this is mostly what I was talking about. If you have a top level client key, you're dealing with a client project. So, React Apollo, I don't even know the name of the Python library, but if you're using Python or you're using Dart, I think we even support as a kind of a project, that's a client project. Whereas if you're building an API, it's a service project. I would not recommend personally having both of these keys in a single config. So you'd either have only client or only service, but hopefully not both. You could, but I wouldn't do it because we don't have that documented, and sometimes it might not give you what you'd expect.
That's a really good tip.
For now,
it should only be configured for one or the other, essentially, right? Like.
Yes. which in the case of a monorepo, that means that each of your sub projects, like each of your client projects, each of your service projects in the monorepo have their own config file, which can be annoying, admittedly, but that's the state of the world right now. We hope to fix that in the future, but for now, this is what we're working with.
Hey, that's cool, but it's better to know how to handle it, right?
Yeah. So I'm gonna add one thing in here. I'm gonna add an includes. So we have two keys under both client projects and service projects, includes and excludes. And these are just a list of globs for where to find your files. So a minute ago, I mentioned the, my query.js, query.graphql, query2.graphql. Apollo by default searches underneath the source directory .src and tries to find JavaScript files, GraphQL files, GraphQL.js files, and TypeScript files, I think, are the default set. And .gql files. But if you have a project structure that's different than that, for example, if you have like imports at the top, or you have source, like source instead of src at the top level, you're going to need to set up your includes to actually manually tell Apollo, hey, this is where you're going to find my operations. This is where you're going to find my schema, stuff like that. But for our cases, all of the projects in this repo have everything under src, so we don't need to worry about that right now. But just a quick note. Yeah, and that's documented inside the on the docs page on apollographql.com. So if you went there to go find it, it would tell you how to set up. So yeah, So I mentioned earlier we had that local schema file. That is where Apollo knows, like, this is what we're actually generating types against. Like, we have these operations. How do we know that, one, these operations are valid against our schema, but two, like, what are the types? So we need to define our local schema file, but before we do that, we need to tell we need to add a service for the client. So we need to say, hey, this is a client. This client is associated with a service, which could be a schema, it could be Apollo Graph Manager, it could be a running endpoint that you introspect against. So if you want to go ahead and add a service key underneath the client.
Ah, interesting. So here it's called service key. Oh, service key.
No,
got
just
it.
service.
Like key,
sorry.
like
I was saying like
yeah.
And then under service, you can add local schema file, camel cased. Local schema file, and that can be just ./schema.graphql.
Oh no, schema. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. I'm gonna save it.
Nice.
It's saved.
Yep. So yes, and this is and why I mentioned having a top level client and top level service already instead of looking at it later is a lot of people, when they're going through and setting up a client project, this is probably the easiest mistake to make, is that a lot of people, instead of putting the service inside the client and saying like, hey, this is a service for a client, they'll actually put it as its own top level key. So you have, that's not formatted correctly, but they'll do it like this. So they'll say like, I have a client named something, and then they'll actually, perfect. Yeah, that's why. And yeah, they'll set it up like this. And this is what I was talking about a minute ago, where you have two top level, you have a client and a service. And the way the Apollo, like actual internals of the Apollo config work is that it assumes, if there's both, it assumes that it's a service, which if you're trying to generate types for a client, ends up breaking things. So that's why we're not gonna do this. I'm just gonna move this back up one line and hopefully it'll add a comma, because JavaScript. So this that we have right now actually should work. So if we go back down to the terminal and run our codegen command again,
but this time,
but don't specify where to find. Yep. So if you remove local schema file,
step ahead of you, man. Boom. Hey, let's push this over a little bit.
Look at it.
Use a little bit more of that space.
Yeah, I think most of these files are.
Look.
Yeah, I think most of these files aren't too wide.
Yeah,
so
I think like
there.
we don't really need to see the whole query in most cases, and the config most likely won't get too far over. Boom, loading Apollo project, generating query files with TypeScript target. Very cool. And So
Perfect.
another way, actually, to verify this would be, well, now it looks like the generated, oh, that's global types. That's generated as well, right? That's very cool. Okay.
Yep.
Would
Yeah,
the
it's
right thing
generated
to
every
do be to
time.
delete these and run the command and then make sure that they reappear? Like, because weren't they already there in theory? I'm just
Yeah, go
curious
for
to
it.
see what happens. Watch, it's probably gonna blow
Yeah, do
everything
it.
up.
I do think. Yeah, I'll let you run it again.
Okay.
Then I'll say something. Bum, bum, bum.
It's definitely gonna take
Go.
longer now.
I do think that right now, let's say you were to run TypeScript type like CodeGen, it creates all your types for you. And then let's say you just like deleted a file. So you deleted one of the query files and ran TypeScript
Right.
CodeGen again. It wouldn't get rid of old files,
Ah.
which is the tricky part. It would overwrite any of them
Right.
that it needs to
But it's
overwrite,
not gonna go clean up
which is why
things.
we don't
Yeah,
recommend
yeah.
like ever.
It's not gonna go clean
Say
up
what?
other things that existed that are no longer needed.
Right. Right, which it probably should, admittedly. At least I don't think right now it does. It might, but if it does, that would be a surprise to me. So I wouldn't recommend. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
the
all I'll say
moral of
about
the story is don't write
yeah.
your own types and then drop them into a file that has the name generated. Is that what I'm getting at? Or like, or if you
Yeah, and I wouldn't go through and manually edit any of the things in the folder, like the
yeah
generated folder to begin with. So if you wanted to edit a type, regenerate those types.
yeah
Don't go and manually
but
hand tweak
yeah
the
but
types. That's going to lead
got
you
it.
to a
But if
world
you
of hurt.
remove like a .graphql file, you then have to remember to go remove the generated file as well, or they're just gonna hang out. Okay,
I think
cool.
so,
I got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, which for most people, like, especially if you're like
Yeah.
co-locating your queries with like your React components or whatever you're building, most people would catch those things fairly easily, unless you just have like a folder full of tens of thousands of GraphQL files at the root of your project, which, I'm sure some people also do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to each their own. Yeah, so that is that's how you set up a client project, a top level client key. You can give the client a name. In this case, it's just something. That's mostly used for if you're like registering operations or checking operations against a schema, and you want to make sure, and you want to like push those like to our operation registry. That's what that name is for. But for now, we don't need to worry about that. But the most important thing, top level client key and then a service nested underneath it with local schema file. We'll show one later that has a URL, for example, where you find your file or where you find your schema. But for now,
Cool.
that's
That
a
is
client.
awesome. So this would have saved me a bunch of time because I was writing a script to hit like the GitHub API and I was using Apollo client, and now I could specify the service as like just a remote endpoint. You said, right? So like theoretically, I could generate my types from the GitHub API. Is that? Yeah. So
Oh,
that's what I
totally,
should
yeah.
have done. Instead, I like typed all my types out by hand, like some kind of um, non-type generating person.
It forces you to learn the API, I guess, right?
Is more why I was doing it. But if I auto-generated the types, then it would have taken away that bit of learning experience for me. But moving forward, you can bet I'll be doing it this way.
Yeah. Hopefully save yourself a little time in the future,
sure.
but
exactly
learning process.
Cool. Okay, so that's client, right? That's basic client. That's pretty much a wrap, I'd say. Awesome.
That's a basic client.
So let's move on to like what the next one is. I'm gonna clear this out, and we'll CD up and then into basic server. All right.
Basic
So now
server.
we're in there. We got
I probably also could have named this service. I feel like I have a mixture of language in here, but yeah. So into basic server, just go ahead and wipe that file out. We don't need it.
Here, Apollo config file. We're gonna generate you. Yeah, we're gonna generate you instead.
Yeah. So this file is actually a little different, or this project is different from the basic client in that you can actually run it. So the server.js file, if you go through an npm install, you can actually run this project.
I seem to have lost control of my mouse.
Yeah. So go ahead and npm install
I'll
for
do
us.
that.
You might want to do that in another tab too, because we're just
Okay,
gonna like leave it
gotcha.
running.
Wow, that's really annoying. I've been having issues with my mouse, and it like just disconnected on me. Today's not my day.
Ooh.
Oops. Oh, you just ran
I
it.
could
Cool.
run
Thanks
it.
for taking that over. Yeah, and you could probably open a new
Yeah,
terminal
of course.
too, I imagine.
Yeah. If anybody hasn't realized yet, VS Code Live Share is what we're using. I'm not just like taking control of his computer. If you don't know what VS Code Live Share is,
Oh,
it is
yeah.
a lifesaver, and I
yeah, it's
highly
awesome.
recommend it. So there we go. npm installed. I'm gonna go ahead and npm start this server up real quick. Should start at localhost 4000, which it did. No, I don't want to
Hey, I
do
got
that.
it back.
Great. Let's see. Can I start up a
Got
new?
it back. You need me to open up
Nice.
a new.
I don't think you can open
I
up a
can.
new terminal.
Boop.
And I think you have to then make it.
It should be all of them.
Oh, wait,
I think I did all of them.
Okay, yeah, you have to make it.
Yeah. Oh,
You have to make it
annoying.
read write again. The second.
There we go. I wonder if there's like
course.
settings for this though. Like I haven't, configure settings. I'm pretty sure that some of this could be like allow them to join automatically. You know what I mean? Like it's probably just a matter of changing the settings. Okay.
You could just give me all of your like computer login information, everything.
Share
and
all
just,
passwords. And secrets, and get full control over whole computer.
Just give me your like 1Password secret and everything, and we can just go for it. It's fine. So now that we have our server running on localhost 4000, I'm not gonna like I don't think we need to like actually open it up in a browser and see GraphQL or anything right now to like prove that it's running. But we could.
Challenge accepted.
But.
Yeah, well,
is it easy for
now
you?
that you've said that, I don't want everyone out there thinking that it's not running. There we go.
That's true.
Trust us.
There we go. So now you can actually run like a basic like query against that or something. Just.
It did not automatically give me a closing parenthesis. Interesting.
Ooh. Oh, your
characters.
Yeah.
What does this take? Does it take parameters?
It's an object. I think results is the next one. The key would be results. I was watching on the Twitch stream. No wonder there's a delay. And then ID. Yeah. Or name, either one. This is all mocked out, so it's probably just going to give you hello world.
Yeah. I'm going to change my name to hello world.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so if you're planning on actually using this to, bootstrap an API, well, you have to turn off mocking first. Have fun. But either way, we have localhost 4000. We have a GraphQL endpoint running on it. And what we actually want to do to use this with the CLI right now is we want to push this schema to our Graph Manager, to our registry. And what that means is we want to introspect against this project. We want to fetch the schema, and we want to push that schema somewhere else so that in the future, any changes that we make, we can actually test them against traffic. So we can see, nobody's used this field in the past 7 days, so it's safe to drop it. And we can also prevent people from accidentally dropping or changing a field or making breaking changes to our schema that we don't want them to do, because you don't want to break 90% of traffic by breaking one field.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This.
I said okay.
What's that?
That's awesome.
Yeah. This live stream isn't necessarily talking about the benefits of a graph manager, so I'm not going to go crazy into all that. But if you look at our package JSON, you can actually see the scripts that we can run against this to test to make sure it works. And we can also prove that it doesn't work. So start, that works. That's fine. But if you try to run npx Apollo service push right now, actually,
I got my finger over the button. You
actually,
can't see it, but I'm ready.
Let's see. Hold up. I'm trying to think about how to do this. I didn't think about this beforehand. I was about to say you have a service. You have an API key already stored with a service name in it, so this will actually work. Tricky. Okay.
What I can do if
Yeah, I guess this is
it's up to you.
a great time to talk about what
Yeah.
I just said. The API keys we have. So if you use Apollo Graph Manager, whenever you create a new service, whenever you create a new graph, you're given an API key. That API key allows you to register register operations, to register schemas, to check schemas. This API key is pretty much all inclusive. It's what you need to work with the Graph Manager. It looks something like service colon my service name, then a whole bunch of random nonsense afterwards.
That's a production key, everyone. Go
and
get
what
it.
I was
Go
just
get that
saying
key.
is, yeah. Hey, if you run something with this key and it works, okay. I mean, that's fine. It probably won't, but if it does, kudos. We actually already have a key in this project. We hid the file in the file tree, so I don't accidentally show you a valid key, because we don't want somebody trolling us, going and wiping out my schema midstream. So what I was just saying a minute ago is the error that you would encounter if you didn't have this key would say like, hey, you don't have an Apollo service key, like you need that to run, and you drop that in a .env file. We called this .env example just so you could rename it .env and just fill in your service key after Apollo key. But you don't, but we already have that, and we already have the service key. And the second thing that's going to happen, and what we're actually going to set up in the config, is this second portion, which is the service name. So today, if you go set up a new service in Apollo Graph Manager, it's not going to give you this. It's going to give you what we call a user token, and that essentially means you don't have to have a separate service key for every single project you're working with. So if you have three separate graphs, you don't need a separate service key for each graph. You have one user token, and then in your config or as a flag when you run the command, you would just specify what the service name is.
Got it. So
but if you do have a service key and a token or a name after it, then it can infer that for you. It can say, hey, we already know the service name. You don't need to specify the service name in a config. Service keys mostly would be used for environments like CI, where you don't want your CI box to have access to every graph that your company has access to. Maybe
that makes sense.
Whereas a user, a user like on your local development machine, you would want to have a user key, not a service key, just for
That's
sake
really
of convenience.
Cool, though. It's how granular you can kind of get with the security there, right? Like, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah. And in the future, we'll have an easier way to set this key. Right now, you can either set it in a .env file. You can have it as an actual environment variable in your environment, and you can also set it using flags running the command itself. So you don't strictly have to have this file for this to work, but we do have one hidden, so it actually does already exist for us. But regardless, let's go back and look at our package.json and look at this script we have here. So we have this Apollo service push, and this is the command that actually registers your schema. And this endpoint flag here tells Apollo where to find your schema, what to introspect against to find your schema. And if I run npm run push, this will work, I think, unless I'm going crazy. Because it knows the name of the service. And I'm going to make this fail in just a second so we can
boom.
Unless we can prove it. Great. Yep. So you can see here, it pushed it. It said it gives you an ID, a hash of the schema that you pushed. It tells you a tag or a variant of the schema. So if you had one graph like tooling test projects, which are all these projects, but you have like a development version of that and a production version of that, you have different variants of the graph. And then it says, you see here, no change in schema from previous version, meaning, this schema hasn't been changed since last time we did it. which makes sense because we haven't done anything.
We haven't broke anything
So we haven't broken anything yet. So if I said npx Apollo service push endpoint, I realize now I could have copied all this, and what just happened? 4,000 graph, not
a
real graph.
Okay.
Let's see. This should give us an error that our API key and the graph ID don't match, because we just saw our graph as tooling test projects, and now we're saying, hey, I want you to push to another graph that's not tooling test projects. And you see here it says error cannot specify a service that does not match. I was about to say this wrapping is weird. Does not match graph. Not a real graph. Does not match graph from the token.
I thought it would be better over here, but I feel like it's better at the bottom. Oh
yeah, I was about to say the wrapping the terminal might be the bigger problem.
Yeah, that is a lot worse. Yeah. I'm used to my widescreen, and on widescreen I have it to the right because it's just like there's so much space.
Oh yeah. 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 On your, what is it, like 26:9 aspect ratio or whatever it is?
It's like a crazy aspect ratio. Yeah, it's like 20 something by 9. Yeah.
A little jealous, but I'll get over it.
I'll send you the link to the monitor.
So that's what happens if you have like the wrong graph. And you get a similar error if you were using a user token, which if you set up a new graph, like I said, you're given a user token, not a service ID or a service key like we just used. But yeah, so most of the time you're gonna have to specify that graph, and you can either do that with -- graph, which I just used, which, surprise, that was actually released yesterday. So before this, for any service operations like service push, service check, had to have an Apollo config file. Now you don't. If you're not doing anything crazy complicated, you don't have to have an Apollo config file. Just like most client operations, most client commands, you don't typically have to have a config file if you don't want one.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So that graph flag is brand new. You can use that if you'd like, but if you don't want to, we can go ahead and set up a Apollo config file inside the basic server if you want to do that, Kurt.
Yeah. Oop, I'm not typing in there. I wonder where I was just
This
typing.
one is going to be nice and easy for us.
Boom. Xprots.
Modular export. Xprots.
And then this time it's service?
Service, yep.
Hey.
So service, and then for this, the only thing we actually need to specify is the name of the service. So if you just say name and you call it tooling test projects, tooling test projects. Yep, this is perfectly valid. This will work great.
Wow, that was so easy.
I wish, I was about to say, now I wish we were using a user token instead of a service key to actually prove that this works, but it does, I promise. But yeah, this is all you need to set up for a basic Apollo config for a server.
That's easy.
Just like a client, if you had, if you wanted to like exclude certain files that you didn't want to pick up in inside your project, you could use the exclude key, say, hey, we don't want to look at these. But you know, by default, this is all you need to get started with a service. And now that we have the graph flag and the CLI, if you don't want to do this, you don't even have to do this. So a lot of flexibility there.
That's cool. Yeah, so this is basically just the name of the graph, right? And so now you can flag it or you can config it, and really the choice is yours depending on what you're doing.
Yep.
Love it.
And this is and graph names, if I remember right now, they're all completely like globally unique. So, you know, even like in our case where we're using a service key instead of a user token, like this, there's no chance of like accidentally pointing at the wrong service here. Like this is a unique ID that every service has.
Got it. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. So that's a basic service. I want to look at a little more complicated of an example with a client.
Okay.
So our next one down the list is client with local directives.
All right, let me shut down this.
Oh yeah, you can stop.
And then we'll get rid of all of this. I'm not even gonna bother saving that. Close that. Close this up. Close this up. Client with local What is this?
Local directives.
Ooh, okay. Let me CD into that. Cool. We are ready.
With local directive.
uh,
Yeah, so this project is this is a fun one. I don't know, you're not following me, right?
if I'm not, I will be again. I don't know why it keeps turning off. There we go.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you keep taking control of it. I keep telling you to, so
Oh,
this is
got
not
it. No,
making our
it's
lives
totally
any
fine.
easier.
So now you got, now I'm following you.
Yeah,
So,
yay. Okay, so this project, it's very similar to the basic client project that we have. Inside of source, we have two files, directive test, which is just a basic query, and extended schema, which is, that's not very
there
helpful,
we
that
go.
hover over there. Extended schema is actually where this gets a little more interesting. So if we look at, oh yeah, that's right, we don't have a schema file. Yeah, so this, so if you remember in the last example, the basic server, we published a service, we published a graph
Right.
to Apollo Graph Manager. And this is where actually it's really beneficial here, is we're actually going to consume that graph here. If you remember in the basic client, we used a local schema file, and we said, you know, this is what we're going to generate our types with. This is how we know what's what. We don't need that, especially in complicated, fast-moving, fast-changing APIs where your schema is changing frequently. You could have a string that turns into, in this case, a required string, and that's a change to your schema, which requires a change to your types. In fact, if it's required and they remove the required, that's actually a breaking change. So like, you really want to be very aware of these kinds of changes. So rather than tracking a single local schema file and keeping it like checked into GitHub or something, we can actually just reference the graph that we just published, and say, hey, use this graph for our generating. But Apollo client gives you a little more power than that, using things like Apollo client for local state, like tracking your local, like your client's application state with the client. You can actually extend that schema. So you have a published schema, and then you actually want to add things to it that only your client can see. For example, here we have a type where we're saying this, that hover is really distracting here. We have a type that there's an origin type in our graph, and if I can actually just look at the basic client schema,
there it is.
It should show it. Yeah, so we have an origin type, but let's say origin right now only has an ID. That's the only thing that exists on origin. That's what's pushed to Apollo Graph Manager. But let's say the client somehow or another, this is maybe not the best example, but the client somehow or another knows the name of that origin's ID, but only the client knows. It's not part of the schema that other clients can consume. So we can extend that local or that remote schema for just the client's purposes. And similarly, we can actually define directives. Here we go. This is at the top level of this folder, directives.graphql. We can actually define directives that only the client know how to deal with. Some of these directives are directives like the ones for working with local client state, like the client directive. Those are things that only the client sees. So whenever we're checking operations against a schema in the registries, we have a push schema. And then we're like building out our client. I'm in the wrong folder here. We're building out our client, and we're building out an operation. But we have something like I don't know what a good example would be. Let's say we had the origin, and then we had the name. But let's say this was a client-only field. This was something that we're managing using Apollo client for a local state. If we're checking this operation against the schema as is that we have published, it's going to say that this is wrong because it's like, hey, we don't have a field named name. We don't know what to do with it. This is wrong. So local fields like origin name and local directives like my client only directive, we need to ignore whenever we check it against our published schema. So that's the purpose of this project, is showing you we have a schema extension, which is very common, and we have a client-only directive, which is less common, but still exists. And we want to check to make sure that actually works. So let's hop back over to Oh, we can get rid of, can you delete the Apollo config
Yes,
file
in
for me?
client with directive, right? All right, cool. It is
Yeah.
gone. I hath done
Gone.
deleted
Great.
it.
Appreciated. Cool. So now let's see. Oh, trying to look. There we go. There's your shared screen. Yeah. So if you hop over to, actually, I don't know if you're still following me. I'm just going to do it. The package.json. Same thing as we've been doing. We still have these scripts that we can run. Apollo client check, for example, and then Apollo client code gen. Same as with our basic client. We're just going to generate some types. And this example actually outputs them to a single folder at the root level of the project, so you don't have folders all over the place. But slight differentiation. But at the end of the day, we're doing the same things here. We're just checking our client. We're generating types for it. If we were to run these right now, they don't work because we don't. One, we're not stripping out that client-only directive, which we can actually just run. We can run a client check and just see what happens here. But let's see, npm run client. Oh wait, check works.
Is that working?
Check.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's
they're both read write. So yeah, do it on. If you go to 1, it should show up. Can you switch to 1? Okay, yeah, there we go. Perfect. Yeah.
Oh, that's not it. And check. Perfect. So this will hopefully be very angry.
I am angry at you. Failure. Oh, cool. Yeah.
Get in line.
Get in line.
Great. Oh, now if we just, if you can scroll back up to that failure that we just saw. Exactly what I was hoping would happen here. We have an unknown directive, my client only directives. That's saying, hey, the schema that you published has no directive named my client only directive. So, you shouldn't push this client application to production because, you're doing some crazy stuff that isn't supported. But that's not actually true. We do handle client directives, but only in the client. So how do we go about telling Apollo to not check that? So if you want to go create for us a brand new Apollo config file.
I like making new files. Actually, I'm lying. My favorite thing is deleting code, but it's a config file, so it doesn't count.
Whenever I went through, I was building this repo, just like copying actual React client projects and deleting all the public folders, everything. It was such a good feeling. Great. Yep, perfect. So, this is a client project. So we have a top level client key. Let's go ahead and give it a name. Oh, sorry, my cursor here. Go ahead and give it a name, anything you want.
Let's do it. Name will equal client with directive, because I'm very original.
Perfect. Client with directive, that's great. Let's do, this is the first project that we actually need to use an includes because the default includes only looks for GraphQL files under source. But if you notice, our directives.graphql file where we define that local directive is not in source. It's at the root of the project. So if you do source / because we need to redefine, we need to make sure we still actually pick up things in source. Is source / ***/ so this is a glob here, star.graphql.
Cool.
Perfect. And then another item on the list is we're just going to target that file directly. So just ..
directives GraphQL.
directives.graphql.
Cool. All right.
Yep. All right. So we have our include. So now we're picking up all the files that we need to do this. 2 more things. We need to define the service that we're checking against. And for this, since we're using just a service with a name, we don't actually need to be explicit and say service.name. We can just use a string as the value for service instead of an object.
And what's the service?
Yeah. Tooling test.
Test tooling project, right? Tooling test project.
Yep. That's the service that we're going to check
Project
against.
or projects?
And then the
Okay.
projects.
Cool. All right. And then what's the other thing?
And then our final item, and this is the important one here, is client-only directives.
Ah.
So this says, whenever you check this operation, just don't send these directives. If you see them in operations anywhere, just ignore them. And yep, that's an array of strings, and it's no @ symbol, but my client-only directive. Yep. Perfect. So now, if we were to go back to the terminal and run our client check again, let's see what happens this time. Now that we have a service defined, now that we have our client directives defined. I really hope so. I'm prepared to debug everything right now. Perfect. All operations are valid against. Let's just for the heck of it, let's break one of these operations real quick. So if you go to the actual operation folder under source, directive test.graphql, and just add a random field under results. Just, I don't know, cat's name or something.
That's my cat's name, so. Yeah.
Zelda. Oh, yeah, that works. Perfect. So now if we run check again, I guess I could also code gen. That's another option that we have here.
Or we could do the code gen, right? Because we're in a client.
So let's say you're a wild and rebellious client developer, and you're going to add Zelda into your characters for some reason. Yeah, there we go. Character or field Zelda does not exist on type character, as it shouldn't.
It should.
I mean, we could do that. We could extend the schema right now. We can go as crazy as you want. Perfect. Yeah. So we just remove that. We don't need that anymore. Oh yeah, Origin Zelda. Perfect.
There we go. And that would work, right? Would that work?
Origin Zelda name. Yeah. So now go back to your directive test file.
Directive test. Okay.
Perfect. I added
there
the
we go,
Zelda field there for you.
Yeah, because that was under Origin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's gonna work, y'all.
Yeah. Luckily, this isn't a runnable project, so we can't actually see this not work because we didn't add resolvers in for Zelda or anything. Zelda on Origin, what?
Oh, is this saved?
Wait, hold
this
up.
is not the right file.
That's the wrong file. Directive test. Still type Origin, Zelda string, Origin. Oh wait, cannot create field name on Origin
I think
either.
this
What?
is not. Because characters, results. No, yeah, that's right. Origin. Let's go look at our schema.
Seems right.
That was under basic server?
Yeah, or basic client. They have the same schema. Character, origin.
That
that should work.
How did I end up breaking that? Should we try it again? Yeah.
Nah.
Punt on that. But it did work before, so I'm not sure what I did to break it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's fine. I probably configured something wrong.
Either way,
no worries.
That's what I get.
Well, origin name wasn't there before. I added origin name
just
also.
Name.
So it was just.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I could just be completely messing everything up here, but yeah. Or maybe that extended schema.
Yeah, well, is that file being included? The extends?
Yeah, it is being included because it's the same glob pattern as would pick up directive test.
Well, I don't want to sit here on it all day.
Extend.
We'll move on.
Yeah. I can debug later and fix this before. Or somebody go in, swoop in, and heroically open a PR to this random repo. Let's close out some of these files I have open up because I've just been keeping everything open.
Me too. I'm gonna start closing all this. I'm not gonna save my changes. I don't know if I just broke it. I'm not gonna save these changes.
Yeah. So I know we were only scheduled to go to 4:30. Is that a hard time limit?
No, it is not a hard time limit. 5 o'clock becomes a hard time limit. So we got another 35 minutes we can bang out here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Delightful. I was about to say, because I think the last two are pretty important. We can run through one of them fairly quickly.
I'm down for whatever.
But great. If you want to open up language with multiple schemas, I'm just going to mention this one. You don't need to CD into it or anything. Yeah, this is a very simple project. If you just want to open the files up, that should.
All right, which files?
So if you go to source, expand source really quick.
Dart.
A couple of things about this project. This one includes, like I mentioned earlier, Dart files, Python files, TypeScript, and JavaScript files. So if you wanted to prove that languages actually work, which is something I've had to prove whenever I release, this is a great way to do this. It still extracts all these operations. The more important thing here, though, is if you look at the root of this folder, we have schema.graphql and schema2.graphql. This is actually important because whenever you're building a service, a lot of times you don't want to have one gigantic 20,000 line long GraphQL file that is all of your schema in one file. So this is how you would go about building multiple files. And when I run this code gen in a second, we're actually using multiple GraphQL files here rather than using a single GraphQL file or using a single endpoint. If you go look at Apollo config.js, this shows you how to actually set this up. Wow. And right now, you can see we have a client name, client includes, which includes the Python files, the Dart files, etc. We're excluding a single file just to make sure it doesn't include that one file. And then service has a local schema file key. This can either be a single file, like a string, or a list of strings. So local schema file has schema.graphql and schema2.graphql. These things actually get combined, and then based on that combination is what it's going to generate types off of. That's super useful on client projects. I don't know how often you would use it. On service projects, you just use that all the time. But it's important to note that it's local schema file, not local schema files. So it's not plural because backwards compatibility is a thing. And if you had like 20 files in here you wanted to use but didn't want to specify every single one of them, this is a JavaScript file that if you so desired, you could use something like FS or glob itself to actually pull in every single file path and just dynamically drop it in here. You don't need to have just static strings all over this file, which is one nice thing about it being a JavaScript file.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Also, hey Peggy, thanks for dropping in. How's it going?
Hey Peggy. So this is just an example. If you have multiple schema files, this is a great place to look. I want to take a quick peek at the last project in the list before we head into the federated one. And it's called Service with whatever this thing is called, Service with Complex Introspection, I think. So if you look at server.js, scroll down to the context function, keep going there. So this is a very simple Apollo server instance, and whenever you start it up, it does a very dumb check just to make sure that you have an authorization header. It doesn't matter what the header is, it just needs an authorization header. And this could be very common if you're running, if you're trying to actually publish a schema like run schema check or schema push against a development endpoint or even a production endpoint that you're running, but you don't want anybody to just come and make requests against it. You might have an authorization header that you want to use. So this is a very dumb example as far as like implementation goes, but the config is the exact same as it would be.
You had more complex authorization, and the same rules apply. Is that okay, cool.
Yes, the implementation here in the server.js file is not what it would look like, but the config.js file is how you would configure something that had more complex authorization. So without like actually starting up this, we don't need to start up this because it does the same thing. If we just look at the config file, we can talk through it similarly. So this thing, it's a service project, so we have a top level service key. Literally anything here. Under that service, instead of listing out files like includes or excludes, instead of listing out anything else, we're saying, hey, we're actually going to be fetching our schema that we want to check against the published one. We're actually fetching this from an endpoint, and it happens to be localhost 4001. And this is how you add headers. Is you just have a headers key, an authorization token. Yeah. And this is where having a config file is comes in to be really important, because if not, you'd have to do something like Apollo, service check, endpoint is
I'm already
this
tired.
thing, whatever you want to call your endpoint. You have a header that's authorization, and your key. If you know the headers, you have to repeat that header flag over and over again. So you theoretically can do this without a config file, but especially once you get into endpoint and headers, just save yourself the work, especially if you have 4 or 5 commands that all do different things or do it against different graph variants. There's no point in, having that exact same logic every place, especially if you're dynamically loading your authorization header inside of JavaScript somehow. That's another entire thing that you can't do through flags.
Yeah.
Does that all make sense here?
Oh yeah, and especially another good thing about this being a JavaScript file is you could easily make these authorization headers environment variables, and you could pull them in, and then maybe you have a different one for I don't know, staging versus production or something like that. There's just all kinds of ways in which having a JavaScript file is more useful than not. So yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could even this isn't in the example or anything, but you could even inside that service name, if you wanted to dynamically choose between, I think the default is current, the current variant of your graph versus a development variant.
Cool.
You could even choose this at execution time, whenever you run the command, it could choose based on an environment variable or something. We don't show that as an example here, but that's definitely an option.
I did not know that. That's very cool.
It being a JavaScript file actually allows for a lot of really interesting use cases. If you want to see maybe the most complicated use case imaginable, the Relay VS Code plugin actually modifies this with some fun stuff. So if you can find the Relay VS Code plugin, it's built off the Apollo GraphQL one with some very interesting custom config work.
That's wild.
So that's the time. But yeah, that is probably the messiest config setup I've had to deal with, in case you were wondering.
That's wild.
So let's actually close all of this out, and we're going to open up VS Code within the federated full stack tutorial project.
You want to open this as the root of VS Code, or just open it here, you mean?
Yes. Yeah, I only want that
Okay, so open. Get rid of everything else. Okay, we can do that. If I could get my mouse to work. I am not sure what's going on with this thing today.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do it without closing VS Code.
I don't think so. I think what I'll have to do is open and then to this folder.
Yeah, probably.
It is going to boot you. I'm definitely going to have to re-add you.
Yeah. That's fine. You don't need to restart sharing. I can just, I can look at the shared screen and talk through everything.
Apollo tooling, test projects, and then we want federated full stack tutorial, right? All right.
Yeah, federated full stack tutorial. So for those who didn't hear me earlier, we have a full stack tutorial that's not federated. It's a lot more fun to work with than this project is. This is just an example to make sure that I had configuration working properly for federated services, and I was actually going to write about this, but kind of dropped that a while back. So this has 2 folders in it. It has a client and it has a list of services inside of it that are federated using Apollo Federation. And you can see launches and users is actually its own individual GraphQL service. We don't, hold up. Launches and users. Kurt, if you don't mind, can we hide the .env file again?
So interesting. Yes, we can absolutely do that. I believe
that was workspace settings.
Workspace settings. Features Explorer. Oh wait, I'm gonna search.
I think I was gonna say just search for hide.
And then here we go.
There we go. ////env. Perfect.
Oh,
I should get rid of all those things, just so we don't expose any actual keys here. Perfect. So before we do anything, just open up the package.json for like, go at the root level of the services folder. So at the very bottom.
This guy.
That one. Yeah. So there's a dumb little command here on the end of scripts. It's called list. This just essentially looks at this graph. So the tooling test projects fed graph, and it just lists off any number of services or errors miserably. Apollo, not command. Put VX in front of that. Sorry, I must have forgotten that.
And what's interesting is, do I not even have the CLI installed right now? I don't think I've installed it. This is a newer computer. It's a new computer,
not.
So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and I would recommend it even, a lot of people install Apollo as a dev dependency to the project and then use NPM scripts to do everything. Which makes it easier to keep up to date across your development team on the same version of the CLI. And it prevents exactly what just happened from ever happening. So you can see right now we have two services that have already been pushed to Apollo Graph Manager called launches and users. They each host their own, they're each responsible for their own portion of the schema. Launches, this is a completely different graph or a completely different schema from what we've been looking at so far. So if you go look at the source under launches, for example, and go to schema.graphql. I don't know what schema2.graphql there is, but anyway, this is a graph. It has to do with launches, so it has types like launch, rocket, launch connection, mission. I think site is also, or no, site's just a string. This service is responsible for all these types, and then if you go to the user service and look at its graph.
Cool.
Yep. This has anything that involves a user. So booking a trip, for example, if you want to book a rocket trip, it has to do with the user. A login, if you're trying to log into the service, this is all user-based. So yeah, each of these graphs, each of these services have their own portion of the graph that it works with. But that's the important thing here, is that we have a federated service pushed to Apollo Graph Manager. Each of these folders, launches and users, is its own federated service, and you can actually start this up and run it. We're not going to do that. You have to npm install both of these services. You have to npm install from the root, start up 3 different services, and then start up your client if you actually want to interact with it. I really just wanted to demonstrate this project as a proper example of a monorepo. So if you close up the source folders and everything to clean up the file tree a little bit.
Real quick, I just want to take a note that Peggy was also unaware that you had a federated version of the full stack tutorial. And yes, Peggy, it is very cool. And I said that we could possibly do something with this, and then I got my evil genius fingers going, because we'll repost the
probably.
Yeah, for sure. What were you saying, Jake? Sorry.
Yeah. The test projects repo that I'm about to drop a link in, it includes the full stack tutorial federated example, but it doesn't. It's not just that. I also have written probably 30 minutes worth of reading on how to convert from the standalone one to the federated one, but I just let that project die at some point. So here we are, using it in a Twitch stream. But yeah, so do you have the Apollo extension started up right now? Yes. So now if you go to client, for example, we can look at how the client actually uses this. If you go to apollo config.js, this client, it's not looking at, wait, this isn't right. I must not have pushed this. That's unfortunate.
Push it now.
I
said push it now.
What's that?
Push it now.
Let me see. Can probably push it now. Weird. Oh, I guess I didn't. Yikes. Anyhow, what I was gonna say is I was gonna compare this to the regular client project that we have. I guess I haven't changed on my local machine yet either. Um, but essentially, the client doesn't see this federated graph any different than it sees a
Okay.
normal graph. Um, it doesn't see it any differently from whenever you're actually running the client project. It makes a single API call to a gateway. It doesn't need to do anything. It doesn't need to know that this is a federated graph with multiple
Right.
services.
For all,
Similarly, when you're
I
generating,
was gonna say, for all
what's that?
intended purposes, it just sees it as a graph. It doesn't know that like behind the scenes there's a lot
Yeah,
of awesome things happening. Essentially, cool.
exactly. And like the same applies even for like client codegen, for example. So like your config, it's going to look exactly the same as
Right.
any other client. So I mean, if you change the name from service to Apollo or a tooling test projects fed, for example, it would
Right.
probably just
Okay.
work.
Okay.
I'm hesitant to try it because apparently I haven't done
TM.
this already. But this would look exactly the same as any other client project. The services project is a little bit different. So if you hop under services and look at above services and go into the Apollo config under one of the
Okay.
services.
Apollo config. Boop. Oh, look, there you go.
Yeah. So this thing, it works the exact same. It shows you, it also looks just like a normal service config. The only difference is whenever you're running something like schema check or schema push, you just have to specify, hey, this is a federated service and this is like the name of the service we're checking it against. So if we were to run, if you go to package.json here, we can actually probably just run this. If you look at, oh, no, we can't run this actually because it's, no, we can, yeah. Run the check script.
Nah. Oh, Apollo
No,
command not bound. We can fix that.
What is it? Oh, every time. I did a really bad job blending all this. Yeah, let's run this again. Yeah, so this also just looks like a normal service check, except you're just saying, hey, this is a federated graph. I'm checking this service against the launches service. And what it should say is that there's no changes because there aren't.
Right.
For example.
Zero composition errors. Yep. Nothing changed.
Yep. And you can see it says not only are there 0 changes, but there are also 0 breaking changes. For example, if you had a field that you added, that's not going to break any client consuming the graph. That's not going to break the other graph because of federate or the other service. Because with federated services, you have the ability to mess up the actual composition. If you define something that another graph already has and already owns, or another service already owns, you can mess up composition. But for the most part, pushing, checking, everything still looks the same. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to show. I wanted to open this project separately as its own like VS Code instance, because if you're looking for how to configure a monorepo that has multiple services in it, a client in it, this is exactly
awesome.
that.
This is such a great example. And oddly enough, one of my biggest takeaways from this is like, first of all, I now feel super comfortable configuring projects, like that's done. But I've actually gotten like a much better understanding of like federation as a whole, and like the difference between like where your schemas can be defined between locally and remote, and how those different services work together, and then how clients can make use of all this. So this has been super enlightening for me.
Yeah, and it was really cool too, because like when it comes to actually setting up this project, I even had like I didn't change the client in this at all. Like when it comes to federation, there's a client, and there was originally a single service that was just a GraphQL API, and I went step by step and changed the underlying API, but never had to change a single thing on the client. Which is really,
it's amazing.
Yeah, which is really a cool thing about like Apollo Federation and like using federation with GraphQL, is that your API that your clients see never changes one bit. How you develop it and like how you check against it, how you prevent breaking changes in the future, like that changes a little bit, but your client never needs to know any of that, which is really, really cool.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, that's really awesome. Do you have any like any closing thoughts you want to add about that? I mean, I'm just like in mind blown state right now. So I'm feeling pretty good, man. This is a very good overview of just all the different ways that Apollo
Yeah,
is used and configured.
yeah, I'm glad. I guess my only closing thought would be that we're like, this is not a static project. Like the config, the way that you set these things up is not at all static. I mean, we released a minor yesterday with a bunch of changes to config and to flags and stuff that actually make using commands a lot easier, especially without a config. And like, I really wanted to do this talking about Apollo CLI 2.0 or 2.
Right.
Whatever. Because in the future, like in a 3.0, we are looking to fix a lot of these configuration pain points, like the difference in a client and a service project. In the future, hopefully, we would just have an Apollo project. It doesn't matter whether it's a client or a service.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like at the end of the day, like you don't need to know if you're a client or a service. You're just saying, where do I find my schema?
Yeah.
Where do I find my operations? And what am I checking against? You know?
Yeah. The project itself has no idea of whether or not like it's a client or a service. You know what I mean? Like, and that also erases that edge case you were talking about way earlier, where sometimes it's both, right? It's a service and a client.
Yeah, exactly. So if you said client code gen, like first off, like you mean you could be generating like code for a server at some point, like even if you are generating client code, like client operation types for a server, you're still like you're using a client command on a server, which would feel very weird. So yeah, we are looking at ways. I've been prototyping designs of a new config for quite some time. I would say just like keep an eye out, follow me on Twitter, plug. Just keep an eye out because we will be asking people for feedback on how these things look in the future. Yeah, and thank you for everybody who's like been patient with config issues or poor error handling in the past, because it's been a bumpy road. We still have a long way to go as far as making the CLI usable and happy to work with, but it's fun. It's fun. We're doing
Yeah, it's, and I, like with anything, right? So as the projects grow and things grow and the landscape of GraphQL changes and stuff, it's only natural that this is going to change with it, right? Yeah, and I think you've been doing a bang-up job personally, Jake, and I would just like to thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So this that's really wraps it up for us today. So yeah, thank you for everyone tuning in, and sorry about the streaming issues that we faced earlier. I don't know if that was on our end with the frames drop or what was going on. Maybe I had a slight internet connection, but yeah, seems to be much improved, and it seems like we got the whole thing done, which was amazing. Yeah, so yeah, thank you for everyone who's joining us. And Theo, if you're still there, ping either myself or actually, yeah, ping me if you have questions. You were wanting to talk about Apollo Cache. So if you're still around and that's something, if not, I'm going to try and find you, and then I'll ping you to get your questions for me. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. It was a pleasure. And yeah, that's going to wrap it up for us. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.